The dust kicked up by wagon wheels settled like a funeral shroud over Broken Creek, Arizona territory, in the scorching summer of 1878. The makeshift auction platform stood like a gallows in the town square, where human misery was bought and sold like livestock. Among the crowd of weathered faces and calculating eyes, a young woman stood with her hands bound behind her back, her long dark hair matted against her pale, hollow cheeks. She couldn't have been more than 19, but her eyes held the haunted weight of someone who had witnessed horrors that would break most grown men. "What am I bid for this one?" The auctioneer's voice cracked through the oppressive desert heat like a whip. His fat fingers gestured dismissively at the trembling girl. "She's mute as a stone, but she's got strong hands and a sturdy back. Good for cooking, cleaning, mending, whatever else a man might need around his place." His leering grin made several men in the crowd chuckle darkly, their intentions as clear as the blazing sun overhead. "Let's start the bidding at $3. Come on, gentlemen, she's worth at least that much." The girl's name was Elena Martinez, though no one had bothered to ask. She had been traveling with a merchant wagon train from Santa Fe when Apache raiders struck like lightning from the desert hills 2 weeks ago, killing her parents and younger brother before her very eyes. When the cavalry finally caught the raiding party 3 days later, she was deemed government property to be sold at auction to recoup the military's expenses. The trauma had stolen her voice as surely as if someone had cut her throat, leaving her trapped in a prison of silence and terror. In the crowd, partially hidden beneath the shadow of a weathered black hat, a tall figure watched the proceedings, with storm-gray eyes that missed nothing. He was lean but broad-shouldered, with work-hardened hands that spoke of years spent breaking horses and mending fences under the brutal desert sun. A jagged scar ran from his left ear to his jaw, pale, against his sun-darkened skin, and most notably he had not spoken a single word since riding into town 3 days ago. The locals had taken to calling him the Silent Stranger, though none dared say it within earshot. His name was Samuel Hart, and he carried his own reasons for silence like stones in his chest. A former Confederate soldier who had lost everything, worth having in the war, including his voice to a Union saber that had nearly taken his life at Chancellorsville, he had wandered the territories for over a decade, taking work where he found it, and speaking to no living soul. But something about the girl on that platform stirred something in his chest that he thought had died in the mud of Virginia. What will this mysterious stranger do? The answer will change everything you think you know about love and sacrifice. $3, called out a greasy man with tobacco-stained teeth and hands that looked like they'd never seen honest work. "I'll take her off your hands." The way his eyes crawled over Elena's trembling form made Samuel's jaw clench tight enough to crack teeth. Without conscious thought, Samuel's scarred hand moved to the small leather pouch at his belt. Those silver coins represented 2 months of back-breaking work on a cattle drive, money he'd been saving for winter supplies and a new horse. But as he watched Elena's shoulders shake with silent, desperate sobs, he knew with absolute certainty what he had to do. Samuel stepped forward through the crowd, his spurs ringing against the hard-packed earth with each deliberate step. He pulled out $5 silver and held them high above his head, the metal catching the harsh sunlight like a beacon of hope in this god-forsaken place. The entire crowd turned to stare at this mysterious figure, who had suddenly entered their sordid business transaction. $5, the auctioneer called out, his voice rising with greedy excitement at the unexpected bidding war. "Do I hear $6 for this fine specimen?" The greasy man spat a stream of brown tobacco juice into the dust and shook his head, with obvious disappointment, unwilling to bid higher for damaged goods that couldn't even scream when hurt. Samuel's offer stood unchallenged in the sudden, expectant silence that fell over the crowd like a heavy blanket. Samuel walked slowly to the platform, each footstep deliberate and measured, his spurs creating small music in the oppressive quiet. He placed the 5 silver coins in the auctioneer's outstretched, sweaty palm, with the solemnity of a man making a sacred vow. The auctioneer bit each coin with yellowed teeth, nodded with satisfaction at their authenticity, and gestured toward Elena with a theatrical flourish. "She's all yours, stranger. Fair warning, though. She ain't spoke so much as a whisper since the cavalry brought her in. Might be touched in the head if you catch my meaning." Samuel ignored the cruel comment entirely, and approached Elena with the careful, patient movements of a man accustomed to gentling spooked horses. Her dark eyes met his across the space between them, and for one electric moment, something passed between two damaged souls, a recognition of shared pain perhaps, or simply the profound relief of finding another human being who understood the crushing weight of silence and loss. Elena flinched when Samuel pulled out a folding knife, her body tensing for violence that never came. Instead, he carefully cut the rough ropes that bound her wrists, his movements gentle despite his scarred, work-hardened hands. The hemp fell away like shed skin, and Elena rubbed her raw wrists while staring at this stranger who had just purchased her freedom for the price of a decent meal. The crowd began to disperse, disappointed that their afternoon entertainment had ended so quietly and without the violence they'd been hoping for. Samuel gestured toward his horse, a sturdy bay mare that waited patiently at the hitching post, her reins wrapped loosely around the weathered wood. Samuel pulled out a piece of paper and a pencil stub from his vest pocket, tools of communication he'd grown accustomed to carrying during his years of enforced silence. His handwriting was surprisingly neat for a cowboy, a remnant of his former life as a schoolteacher before the war destroyed everything he'd once been. He wrote quickly, "My name is Samuel Hart. I will not hurt you. Do you have family? Somewhere. Safe to go?" He handed Elena the paper and pencil with the same gentle care he'd shown while freeing her hands. Elena stared at the words for a long moment, her finger tracing each letter as if she'd forgotten how to read. Finally, she looked up at Samuel's scarred face, searching for deception and finding only patient kindness. Slowly, with hands that shook like autumn leaves, she took the pencil and wrote beneath his words in a delicate script, "Elena Martinez. No family left. Nowhere to go. Why did you help me?" Samuel read her response and felt something crack open in the region where his heart used to be. He wrote back with careful deliberation, "Because everyone deserves a choice about their own life." Those simple words hit Elena like a physical blow. Choice. Such a small word for something she'd thought lost forever. Samuel helped her onto his horse with the same gentle patience, then swung up behind her. As they rode out of Broken Creek toward an uncertain future, Elena felt the desert wind in her hair for the first time in weeks, and dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, her nightmare was finally ending. Samuel's ranch sat nestled in a valley, between two red mesa walls about 20 miles from the nearest settlement. It was modest but clearly well maintained, with a small adobe house, a sturdy barn, and a corral that held 3 horses who lifted their heads to watch the newcomers arrive. Elena noticed immediately that someone had taken great care with the property. Vegetables grew in neat rows despite the harsh climate, and wildflowers had been planted near the front porch, though they looked like they needed a woman's touch. Samuel dismounted first, then helped Elena down with the same careful attention he'd shown throughout their journey. She stood uncertainly in the dusty yard, unsure of what was expected of her in this strange new place. Her experience with men who bought women at auctions had taught her to expect the worst, and she couldn't quite believe that this scarred stranger might be different from the others. Samuel disappeared into the house and returned moments later, with another piece of paper, his message already written in that careful script. "You can stay in the spare room for as long as you need. No strings attached, no expectations. When you're ready to leave, I'll take you wherever you want to go. You have my word." Elena read the note twice, hardly believing what she was seeing. In her short, brutal experience, men who purchased women had very specific and usually horrible expectations. She took the pencil with trembling fingers and wrote back, "What do you want from me in return?" Samuel's response was immediate and simple. "Help around the ranch if you're willing. Fair wages for fair work, nothing more, nothing less. Your choices are your own." Elena stared at those words until they blurred through her tears. When was the last time anyone had offered her a choice about anything? When had anyone treated her like a human being, rather than property to be used and discarded? She nodded, slowly, not trusting herself to write a response that wouldn't dissolve into incoherent gratitude. That first week passed in careful, polite distance as they learned to navigate this strange new arrangement. Samuel showed Elena around the property, through gestures and occasional written notes, teaching her the daily routines that kept the ranch functioning. She proved to be a quick learner and willing worker, rising before dawn to feed the chickens and milk the cow without being asked. In the evenings, they would sit on the front porch in companionable silence, both lost in their own thoughts as the desert sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple that took Elena's breath away. The silence between them felt different from the crushing quiet of her trauma. This was peaceful, healing, like the first rest after a long, difficult journey. Slowly, Elena began to notice the small kindnesses Samuel showed without fanfare or expectation of gratitude. How he always made sure she had enough to eat before serving himself. How he left fresh wildflowers on the kitchen table each morning without explanation. How he never tried to enter her room or make her feel trapped in this place that was beginning to feel like sanctuary. As the weeks turned into months, Elena began to feel the constant tension in her shoulders ease for the first time since the attack. Samuel's quiet presence was like a balm to her wounded spirit. He never pushed her to speak, never made her feel broken or lacking because of her silence. In his own wordless way, he seemed to understand that healing couldn't be rushed or forced. One evening, as they sat watching the first stars appear in the vast desert sky, Elena pulled out the paper and pencil that had become their constant companions. The question she wrote had been burning in her heart for weeks. "Why don't you speak? Were you born this way?" Samuel was quiet for a long time, staring out at the darkening landscape. Finally, he took the pencil and wrote slowly. "War wound. Confederate soldier. Union saber across the throat at Chancellorsville. Lost my voice and my faith in humanity the same day. What about you?" Elena read his words, and felt her heart break for this gentle man who had endured his own hell. She took the pencil and wrote carefully. "Apache attack on our wagon train. Watched them kill my parents and little brother. The words just stopped coming after that, like my voice died with them." They sat in deeper silence after that exchange, two broken people who had found unexpected solace in each other's quiet understanding. The desert night settled around them like a protective blanket, and for the first time in years, neither of them felt completely alone with their pain. Samuel reached over slowly and covered Elena's hand with his own scarred one, a simple gesture that somehow conveyed more comfort than 1,000 spoken words could have managed. Elena didn't pull away, and they sat like that until the moon rose high overhead, connected by shared understanding and the beginning of something that might someday become trust. As autumn painted the cottonwoods along the creek gold and red, Elena and Samuel developed their own private language of gestures, meaningful glances and carefully written words. Elena took over the neglected garden with fierce determination, coaxing life from the harsh desert soil with a patience that amazed Samuel. Under her care, vegetables flourished and flowers bloomed in defiance of the unforgiving climate. Samuel, in turn, taught Elena to ride and rope, skills that might serve her well if she ever decided to leave this place. But as the weeks passed, neither of them spoke of her eventual departure. The subject hung between them like morning mist, acknowledged but not discussed. Their evening conversations grew longer and more intimate as trust slowly replaced wariness. Elena learned that Samuel had been a school teacher before the war, that he loved to read but hadn't opened a book since his injury robbed him of the joy he'd once found in stories. She shared memories of her childhood in Santa Fe, her dreams of becoming a seamstress, her terror that she would never feel truly safe in the world again. One particularly cold night, as the first frost touched the valley with crystalline fingers, Elena found Samuel in the barn currying his horse with methodical, almost meditative strokes. Something about his posture spoke of old loneliness and deeper hurts than even she had imagined. She approached slowly and placed her small hand over his larger one, stopping his motion. When he looked at her with those storm-gray eyes, she mouthed the words "thank you" with such heartfelt sincerity that tears sprang unbidden to his eyes. He had grown accustomed to her silence, but this wordless communication felt more profound than any speech. He pulled out a scrap of paper and wrote, "You've given me far more than I ever gave you, Elena." She read the note and smiled, the first genuine, unguarded smile Samuel had seen from her since that terrible day at the auction. She took the pencil and wrote, "You gave me back my life. You showed me that not all men are monsters." That night, Samuel sat up long past midnight, staring at those words by lamplight and feeling something he hadn't experienced in over a decade. Genuine hope for a future that might hold more than mere survival. Elena had brought light back into his world, and he was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, two broken people could help each other become whole again. Their peaceful existence shattered like glass on a cold December morning when three riders approached the ranch at a hard gallop. Elena was hanging laundry on the line when she saw them coming across the valley, and something about their purposeful bearing made her drop the wet sheets and run toward the house with her heart hammering against her ribs. Samuel was repairing a section of fence when he heard the thunder of approaching horses. One look at Elena's terrified face told him everything he needed to know. Their sanctuary had been discovered, and trouble was riding hard toward their door. The lead rider was a U.S. Marshal, his badge glinting like a cold star in the weak winter sunlight. Behind him rode two men Elena recognized with sickening clarity, bounty hunters who specialized in tracking Apache raiders and recovering their captives. They had found her trail at last, and the peaceful life she'd built with Samuel was about to crumble to dust. "You Samuel Hart?" the marshal called out in a voice accustomed to being obeyed. When Samuel nodded grimly, the man continued, "This woman is wanted for questioning in connection with Apache raids in the territory. She was reported as an escaped captive who may have information vital to our investigation." Elena's hands shook violently as she wrote frantically on a piece of paper, "They want to take me back to face questions I can't answer. I can't survive that kind of interrogation. Please don't let them take me." Samuel read her desperate words and felt fury build in his chest like a wildfire consuming dry grass. He strode to his house and returned with a shotgun, not pointing it at anyone but making his protective intentions crystal clear. He pulled out paper and wrote in large, bold letters that he held up for all to see. "She stays here. She's done. Nothing wrong except survive." The marshal shifted uncomfortably in his saddle, clearly not expecting resistance from a mute rancher. "Now see here, Hart. This woman was sold at what may have been an illegal auction. There are serious questions about her time with the Apache, and she needs to come with us for proper questioning by military authorities." One of the bounty hunters, a thin man with cruel eyes and a mouth like a knife cut, spoke up with obvious malice. "She's been living in sin with you, Hart. That makes her a whore under territorial law, and whores don't get to pick and choose. They're customers. We're taking her back to face justice." Elena fell to her knees in the dirt, her whole body shaking with the kind of terror that reaches all the way down to the bone. Samuel looked at her, then at the men who wanted to destroy the fragile peace they had built together in this harsh but beautiful place. In that moment, he made a decision that would change both their lives forever. What choice will Samuel make to protect the woman he's grown to love? Comment below what you think a real man should do when everything he cares about is threatened. Samuel set down his shotgun and walked slowly to where Elena knelt in the dust, her body racked with silent sobs of terror. He helped her to her feet with infinite gentleness, then turned to face the marshal with an expression of grim determination that would have made his old Confederate commanding officer proud. Pulling out his paper and pencil, Samuel wrote in large, clear letters and held the message up for all three men to see. "She is my wife. We were married 2 months ago by Circuit Preacher Williams. She is under my protection as my legal spouse." The marshal frowned deeply, clearly not expecting this complication. "You got papers to prove that claim, Hart? Because if you're lying to a federal officer, that's a serious crime." Samuel's mind raced faster than it had since his battlefield days. He knew there had been no circuit preacher, knew he was taking an enormous legal risk with this desperate lie. But as he looked at Elena's face and saw the trust and desperate hope shining in her dark eyes, he knew he would face any consequence to keep her safe from these vultures. Elena understood immediately what Samuel was attempting to do. When he took her trembling hand and squeezed it gently, she squeezed back with all her strength, a silent agreement passing between them like an electric current. They were partners now, bound not by any legal document, but by something far deeper. then marriage certificates or territorial law. Samuel gestured toward the house, indicating he would retrieve the necessary documentation. Elena's heart hammered as she realized the magnitude of what he was risking for her. If they discovered his deception, he could face prison or worse for interfering with a federal investigation. Samuel returned from the house carrying his old family Bible and a piece of paper he had hastily forged, copying the style of marriage certificates he remembered from his teaching days before the war destroyed his old life. His hands remained steady despite the magnitude of his gamble. Some skills learned under fire never fade. The marshal examined the crude forgery briefly, clearly not an expert in such documents. The paper looked official enough to pass casual inspection, and the Bible added an air of religious authenticity that satisfied his cursory examination. "Looks legitimate," the marshal admitted grudgingly. "But that doesn't change the fact that she still needs to answer questions about her time with hostile Indians. The military has procedures for debriefing former captives," Samuel wrote again, his script bold and unwavering. "She will answer any questions you have right here, with me present as her husband. She has endured enough trauma without being dragged away from the only safe place she's known." The cruel-eyed bounty hunter wasn't satisfied with this arrangement. He spurred his horse closer, his hand resting meaningfully on his gun butt. "Something stinks about this whole setup, Marshal. Neither one of them has said a damn word out loud this entire time. What kind of marriage is that? I think they're both lying through their teeth." Elena stepped forward, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She looked at Samuel, then at the men who threatened to destroy their peaceful life, and made a choice that required more courage than she knew she possessed. Opening her mouth for the first time in months, Elena forced words through her damaged throat in a voice rusty from disuse but clear enough for all to hear. "He is my husband. I choose to stay with him. This is my home. Now." The words came out cracked and barely above a whisper, but they rang across the valley like a bell. Samuel stared at Elena in complete amazement, tears forming in his storm-gray eyes. She had found her voice again, and she had used it to defend their love and their life together. The marshal looked between them, seeing the obvious affection and fierce protection they showed each other. Even his cynical lawman's heart was moved by the sight of two damaged people who had clearly found healing in each other's company. "All right," he said finally, his voice softer than before. "The questioning can happen here, on your property. But make no mistake, Mrs. Hart, if there's any evidence you aided the Apache willingly or withheld information that could prevent future attacks, you'll still face trial." As the three riders departed with promises to return the following week with a military investigator, Samuel and Elena stood together in their dusty yard, hands clasped tightly, both trembling from the intensity of the confrontation they had just survived. Elena had broken her months of silence to claim him as her husband, and Samuel had risked everything to protect her from a system that saw her as nothing more than a source of information to be extracted by any means necessary. They had crossed a line from which there could be no retreat, and both of them knew it. That evening found them sitting on their familiar porch as the sun set behind the mesa walls, casting long purple shadows across their valley. Elena spoke again, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Thank you for claiming me as your wife, for protecting me when you could have just let them take me." Samuel pulled out his paper and wrote with hands that shook slightly. "Will you really be my wife, Elena? Not just for them, but for us? If you'll have a broken-down ex-soldier who can't even speak your name aloud?" Elena read the question and felt her heart swell with emotion she had thought burned out of her forever. She took the pencil and wrote her answer in script that was steady and sure. "Yes, Samuel Hart, I will be your wife in every way that matters. We're both broken, but maybe we can be broken together and call it whole." Samuel's response was to take her face gently in his calloused hands and kiss her forehead with such profound tenderness that Elena felt the last walls around her damaged heart finally crumble into dust. They were two wounded souls who had found completeness in each other's silence, and now they would face whatever trials lay ahead as husband and wife in truth as well as name. The military questioning came and went the following week like a brief thunderstorm. Elena answered every question with growing confidence, her voice becoming stronger each day as she reclaimed the power of speech. She told the complete truth about her captivity, her traumatic silence, and her profound gratitude to the man who had saved her from a fate worse than death. The investigators, seeing the obvious love and protection between the couple, found no evidence of wrongdoing and closed their files on Elena Martinez, now legally Elena Hart, after a genuine ceremony performed by the same circuit preacher Samuel had invented to protect her. 6 months later, as spring returned to their valley with a riot of wildflowers and green grass, Elena's garden bloomed with vegetables and flowers that filled their table and their home with color and abundant life. Samuel had begun reading again, sharing stories with Elena in the evenings as she worked on her sewing, creating beautiful garments to sell in town. They had learned that love doesn't always announce itself with passionate declarations or grand romantic gestures. Sometimes it grows quietly in the space between two people who understand suffering, who choose daily kindness over casual cruelty, who find in each other's brokenness the very cracks that let healing light shine through. Elena would tell Samuel about her day as they worked side by side, describe the changing colors of their desert sunsets, read aloud from books they both loved. Samuel would listen with the profound attention of a man who understood that human connection was the most precious gift in existence. As Elena watched her husband gentle a new foal in the corral with infinite patience, she reflected on the strange and wonderful path that had brought them together. She had been sold for $3 to a stranger who never spoke, and had found in his silence the most eloquent declaration of love she could have imagined. The desert wind carried the scent of sage and endless possibility across their small ranch, and Elena smiled as she hung clean laundry on the line, humming a half-remembered lullaby from her childhood. She had learned that sometimes the most profound conversations happen without words, and that true healing comes not from forgetting past pain but from building something beautiful and lasting despite it. Their love story would never be written in books or sung in romantic ballads, but it lived in every sunset they watched together, every meal they shared, every night they fell asleep knowing they were no longer alone in this vast, sometimes cruel, world. And that, Elena thought as she watched her silent husband work with infinite patience to earn a wild horse's trust, was exactly as it should be in this life they had built together from silence, choice, and love.